Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest moves to counter the undemocratic elements of the government's policing bill, which is designed to criminalise peaceful protest. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, just as with London's Met Police, the mainstream media have shown just how partisan they are when they have a duty to represent the interests of the public. On Saturday, there were national protests against the policing bill in cities around Britain. You are unlikely to have read anything about it in the national media. Just as with other anti-government protests in recent years, the media have essentially ignored them. Kill the Bill was the initiative. That was what it was called, the protest this weekend, Kill the Bill. And the focus was on the provisions in the policing bill that prevent peaceful protest. Now, the term kill the bill suggests that there will be many people who want the bill scrapped altogether, and you could well imagine why when there are some people who are treated very unfairly by the police and they're not really keen on any new police powers being given, even if they may genuinely be done so. But the protests, they're important and unimportant. They're important because they are an expression of public opposition. The government will keep trying to say that they are acting for the will of the people. They've done it with Brexit, they keep doing it with everything. But it loses some credibility if people are protesting it in large numbers. Hence the blind eye turned by the press. And the protests themselves aren't actually going to help directly, which is why I say they're important and unimportant. They're important as a symbol of public opposition, but in terms of practical benefits, not really. Consider that people across the political spectrum marched in favour of a people's vote a couple of years ago. A few years ago, actually, now. About 1 million people in London on 2 separate occasions. The government still ignored it, but those marches were important because it was a record that the public were being ignored. But the Kill the Bill protests weren't across the political spectrum, so their direct impact is lower. The people taking part in the process were never going to change the minds of Tory MPs. After all, imagine you're a Tory MP and you wanted to go out and talk to the protesters. Would never happen, of course. But let's say you're interested and you wanted to engage. How would that conversation go? So the Tory MP goes, so what are you protesting about there? Well, we don't like the fact that the policing bill criminalises democratic peaceful protest. We think you should vote it down when it returns to the Commons. All right, okay. Thing is that my leadership will tell me to vote it through. So I'd need a compelling reason to go against the whip. I can't always keep voting against the government, you know, otherwise I'll soon lose my position. Well, this could cost you your seat, you see, deeply unpopular. Oh, you'd vote against me if I vote for the bill? Yes, I would. Would you vote for me if I opposed the bill? No, of course not, you're a Tory. And this is the problem. It's like I've said before, when you oppose a policy of the party in government, protesting against it as an opponent of that party doesn't do anything directly. Like Conservative MPs don't care what I think. I'm never going to vote for them. You know, my vote is not up for grabs. Which doesn't mean you can't do anything positive. But what you do have to do is persuade people whose vote is available to that party in government. In this case, the Conservatives. So the people speaking at those rallies, mostly they'll have been speaking to the converted. Does that do any good in itself? No. However, if they're presenting arguments that the people in that crowd can then present to people who might or do vote Conservative, that's when it can do some good. If that's happening, if those speeches were leaking outside of those echo chambers, that's when it can do some good as well. Persuade Conservative or swing voters of the immoral nature of the bill because they, unlike us, have an actual influence. I say us and me. Many of you may well be people who may or may not vote Conservative. But that's how I tend to view partisan protests. I applaud the efforts. They're very important that they take place. But when someone on the left addresses a rally of people who are also on the left and bemoan the evils of the right, what you have is an echo chamber with fresh air. Same thing if right-wing groups do the same raging against a left-wing government, but yeah, that doesn't happen all that often in this country. So the problem is persuading those who support or might support the Conservatives to put pressure on the government. The problem is that the government will say that they need the bill to crack down on serious crime. And indeed, some elements of it may help them do so. It's a massive piece of legislation. There are other provisions which mean the police can arrest you for taking part in a peaceful protest. You could just be standing there minding your own business with a placard. You know, you cough a bit loudly. Disruptive! arrested, gone. You know, this is an outrage, you might say. Who would support such draconian measures, whether on the left or the right of politics? But here's the problem. Those on the right will be told it's just to stop those who glue themselves to the road and other structures. And there's the thing. Lots of people on the right will see it as fine that the police can move people along if you're blocking roads. And the only people who can stop this are, as I say, those whose votes are up for grabs for Tory MPs. They don't care about those of us who would never vote Tory, and they don't have to care. The political system actively discourages them from caring about what we want. And not just our political system. This isn't just first past the post. Any democratic system discourages any politician from addressing the needs of people who will never vote for them. As well intentioned as the very robust protests were on the part of, say, Extinction Rebellion and Insulate Britain, the Conservatives have used them as an excuse to push these measures through. I've said before that any form of protest that pisses off the voters of the party in government will bite you on the arse later on. But all is not quite lost. There are practical ways to try and blunt the worst excesses of this bill. The bill is going to go through. There's nothing to stop that now, but the worst of it can be. One of the few mainstream media reports on the protest was on Radio 4, where the former Conservative Attorney General Dominic Grieve was explaining that the actual clauses in the bill ban all forms of protest, say anywhere near Parliament as an example, even of the most organised and peaceful nature. So there you've got a Conservative trying to point out to Conservative voters how the bill goes way beyond what the government is claiming it is trying to achieve. And I'll tell you my fear. It's because the provisions will not be consistently applied. You'll see right-wing protests going ahead, untouched by the police. We've already seen them, like anti-immigration or anti-vax rallies. And other protests being broken up by the police. The government will claim that they haven't criminalised protests because they will point to protests that were not stopped by the police. How can we have criminalised it? That protest went ahead. They will make out that left-wing protests are disruptive or a threat to security, and they'll be stopped. And right-wing protests won't. But the measures have still not passed through the House of Lords. And this is crucial. Despite the Prime Minister packing the Lords out with his toadies, the Conservatives do not have a majority there. And not all Conservatives appreciate these provisions. For those who haven't been keeping up, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, added loads of pages of amendments to the bill at the Lords stage. This is not supposed to happen. What that did is it prevented them being discussed in the House of Commons committee. What normally happens is government present their bill. It's debated on, it's discussed in committee. The committee present a report, it's debated on again. You have several votes before it goes to the Lords. By putting in these 18 pages of additions to the bill, at the Lords stage, she bypassed elected MPs. It was a cynical attempt to create laws to criminalise people without even the pretense at scrutiny from MPs. Not a single MP of any party was given, apart from the Cabinet, was given the opportunity to debate them because they were added after it left the House of Commons. Now, what normally happens in the Lords is if they vote in favour of the bill as it's presented by the Commons, it goes back to MPs who vote one last time, rubber stamped, off to the Queen to be written into law. If the Lords don't like something in it, they can suggest amendments before sending it back to the Commons. The government can then decide to accept the amendments or send it back. Say, no, we don't like that. Back it goes. If the Lords are resolute and they insist, no, it can't go through like this, then you end up with a bit of ping pong going on. At a push, the government can leave it for a while and then force it through the Lords despite their objections. But that takes time. However, because Priti Patel tried to pull a fast one with these 18 pages of measures, if the Lords vote them down, they're gone. Because they were added at the Lords stage, they don't get sent back to the Commons. The bill without those amendments does, but the amendments are just destroyed. The government can't put them back in when it returns to the Commons because MPs never got to debate or vote for them in the first place. So the bill goes back to the Commons in the form at which it arrived in the Lords with any other amendments the Lords put in, and the government would just have to pass it in that form or look bloody stupid in rejecting it and starting the whole process again. Something that would also take time because you're not allowed to present a bill to Parliament that has already been defeated in the same session. So they'd have to wait a year or so. With Labour, Lib Dems, Greens and some independents opposing these cheeky amendments, it should be enough to block it. We should be sitting here going, well, at least those 18 pages of amendments are not going to go through. That should be that. Unfortunately, I gather that Labour are aiming to amend the provisions rather than just vote them down completely in order to keep what might be useful and remove the poisonous anti-peaceful protest elements. Now, you can argue that case both politically and from the point of view of letting through any measures that are suitable. But it's not a move that's universally appreciated. And the danger is that the government might be able to get some of their clauses reintroduced, even though they're thrown out by the Lords. If the Lords essentially pass an amended form of it, they can just reinstate some. If they just voted it down in its entirety, there'd be nothing the government could do. So, although I'm conscious of the political optics of this one, I just think this is playing with fire. But we will just have to wait. We'll have to keep an eye on it. I mean, it might well be that Labour's amendments are not supported in the Lords and that the Conservatives, in failing to back them, will shoot themselves in the foot and sink the entire thing. Right now, I'm kind of hoping that's going to happen because I personally think Labour are playing with fire here. But that is the latest as I understand it so far. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.